For decades, American law enforcement believed one thing without question. If any prison in the United States was truly inescapable, it was Alcatraz Island. Even if a cell door were left open, even if a guard turned away, the island itself was considered the final barrier. Surrounded by the freezing waters of the Pacific Ocean, battered by powerful currents and unpredictable winds, Alcatraz was designed not just to hold prisoners, but to erase the very idea of escape. Officials openly claimed that no one could survive the swim to the mainland. And yet, in the summer of 1962, that belief was shattered. 3 inmates vanished from their cells, unnoticed for nearly 10 hours, slipping past layers of security that were supposed to be flawless. What followed was not just a prison break investigation, but the birth of one of the most enduring mysteries in American criminal history. Welcome to Beyond Reality Talks. Alcatraz sits roughly 1¼ miles off the coast of San Francisco. The island itself is small, barely 22 acres, but it was carefully chosen for one reason: isolation. Cold water temperatures hovered around 50 degrees Fahrenheit. Strong tidal currents could pull even experienced swimmers out to open sea, and visibility was often poor due to fog. The prison was surrounded by tall fences, guard towers, armed patrols, and constant head counts. By the time it became a federal penitentiary in 1934, Alcatraz was reserved for inmates who had caused serious trouble in other prisons. This was where escape artists were sent, so they would stop trying. The message was clear: once you arrived on the Rock, you were never supposed to leave. Among the men held there were 2 brothers, John and Clarence Anglin. They were bank robbers by conviction, but far from reckless criminals. Raised in a close-knit family, they were known for their intelligence, discipline, and ability to work together. Swimming was a part of their childhood, something they had practiced regularly while growing up in Florida. Then there was Frank Morris. His criminal record stretched back to his teenage years. He had escaped from prisons before and possessed an IQ reportedly well above average. Guards described him as quiet, calculating, and extremely focused. The 4th man tied to the story was Allen West. Unlike the others, West had been involved in prison maintenance work, a role that gave him access to areas and information most inmates never saw. That knowledge would later prove crucial. The escape plan did not form overnight. It began slowly, around 1960, as an observation rather than a decision. West noticed that the ventilation opening behind each cell in cell block B was weaker than expected. Years of moisture and salt air had eroded the concrete, making it crumbly in places. More importantly, the wall itself was thinner than prison officials believed, barely 6 inches thick. To most inmates, this meant nothing. To men who had nothing but time, it meant opportunity. The idea was risky, nearly suicidal, but the longer they studied the walls, the more possible it seemed. Using spoons stolen from the prison dining hall, the men began digging around the vents. Progress was slow, measured in millimeters, but it was steady. They worked during music hour, when the sound of an accordion or harmonica echoed through the cell block, masking the scraping noise. To hide the growing holes, they fashioned makeshift covers from cardboard and paint scavenged from prison maintenance supplies. Later, they built a crude drill using the motor from a broken vacuum cleaner. Every movement was calculated. Every mistake could mean solitary confinement or worse. For nearly 2 years, they continued this work without raising serious suspicion. Escaping the cells, however, was only part of the problem. Guards performed regular night checks, shining flashlights on prisoners to confirm they were asleep in their beds. To bypass this, the men created one of the most infamous deceptions in prison history. Using soap, toothpaste, toilet paper, and stolen plaster, they molded realistic dummy heads. Hair collected from the prison barbershop was carefully attached to complete the illusion. In the dim light of the cell block, the figures looked convincing enough to fool even experienced guards. Above the cell block, there was an unguarded utility corridor, a forgotten space used for pipes and wiring. From there, a vertical pipe led to the prison roof. Because inmates were occasionally sent to the roof for maintenance work, the men were familiar with the layout. They studied guard patterns, counted steps, memorized shadows. Meanwhile, another challenge remained. Even if they reached the water, they would need something to keep them afloat. Over time, they collected dozens of prison-issued raincoats. Stitching them together with improvised tools, they created an inflatable raft and makeshift life vests, sealing seams with heat and steam from prison equipment. It was crude, but it held air. The night of June 11, 1962 arrived quietly. The prison settled into routine silence. Guards made their rounds, lights dimmed. In their cells, Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers placed the dummy heads beneath their blankets. Alan West attempted to follow, but something went wrong. His opening was not wide enough. He struggled to free himself, scraping concrete, losing precious time. Eventually, he realized the truth. He was not getting out that night. The others could not wait. One by one, Morris and the Anglins climbed through the walls, entered the utility corridor, and ascended to the roof. They crossed the fence, reached the edge of the island, inflated their raft, and pushed into the darkness of the bay. For hours, nothing seemed wrong. It wasn't until the morning head count that suspicion arose. A guard tapped one of the prisoners to wake up. The head fell from the bed and shattered on the floor. Panic spread instantly. Alcatraz was sealed. Guards searched every cell, every corridor, every inch of the island. It made no sense. Escape from Alcatraz was supposed to be impossible. The investigation quickly escalated. Federal authorities were notified, and a massive search operation began. Boats scoured the bay. Helicopters surveyed the water. The Coast Guard joined the effort, followed by federal marshals. Days passed, then weeks. Debris was found floating in the water, including fragments believed to be part of the raft and a small bag containing personal items, such as photographs and letters. Officials concluded the men must have drowned, overwhelmed by cold water and powerful currents. But one problem remained. No bodies ever surfaced. In similar cases, drowning victims were usually recovered within days. Months passed. Nothing. Alan West, now fully cooperative, explained the entire plan to investigators. His account matched physical evidence found in the prison, including damaged vents and footprints on the roof. His story checked out. Yet the ultimate question remained. Did the men die, or did they survive? Over the years, new details complicated the case. Members of the Anglin family claimed they had received secret messages. Relatives reported unexplained visitors at family gatherings. A photograph taken years later in Brazil appeared to show two men resembling John and Clarence Anglin. Some investigators dismissed it. Others were unsure. The evidence was never strong enough to close the case definitively. In 1979, the FBI officially ended its investigation, citing lack of proof that the men survived. However, the U.S. Marshals Service kept the case open, stating it would remain unresolved until the men were found or would have reached the age of 99. Alcatraz itself closed just 1 year after the escape due to high operating costs and deteriorating infrastructure. Today, it stands as a national park and tourist attraction. Visitors walk through cell block B, peer into the same cells, and see the damaged vents that once hid a daring plan. Guides tell the story, but no one can finish it with certainty. More than 60 years later, the mystery remains. Did the Pacific Ocean claim 3 desperate men, or did they achieve what the system said was impossible? Somewhere between the cold water and the distant shore, the truth vanished. And that, unanswered question is what transformed a prison escape into legend.